Welcome back. Today, on day 2, we will be covering control flow in Python. Control flow is pretty important, so let's get started initially with conditional statements. Conditional statements allow a program to execute specific blocks of code based on the conditions. Let's look at a syntax of what all different things are available in the conditional block. First, we have if, which executes code if a condition is true. We have else if, adds additional conditions after the initial if. And then finally, we have else, which executes code if none of the previous conditions are met. Let's look at a couple of examples for doing this. So I'm going to open my Visual Studio Code. I'm going to create a new file, call it Python file. I'll save it on my desktop AI Bootcamp. I create a new folder, or inside week 1 I'll create a new folder since it's day 2 inside our week 1, and here I am going to save this as day 2 underscore 1 dot py. And here let's start with an example. Let's call it example 1, where we are checking a particular condition using control flow. So I'm going to create a number variable and give it a value of 10. Next, I'm going to check if number is greater than 0, which is true in our case. It will say or print positive number. Now, this is a conditional statement where it will check if a variable is greater than 0, which is in this case is, so it's going to print this. But what if I want to check for multiple conditions? So I'm going to say else if number equal to 0. So let's say if the number is 0, then I want to just say print 0. And finally, I'll also add an else, which means if it's not greater than 0 and not equal to 0, then which means it's less than 0, which means it's a negative number. So I'm going to say print negative number. Okay, so there you go. So it's either positive or 0 or a negative number. That's what I'm doing here. I can save this. I'm going to go to my command prompt and see that I am in week 1. I'll move to day 2, clear this. So I have my day 2 underscore 1. I'm going to run this Python day 2 underscore 1 py, and it says positive number. If I change this number to 0, run this again, it will say 0. If I change it to minus, let's say 50, run this, it'll say negative number. So what happens is every time it looks at the number, and depending on which one of these are true, it will print that particular value. Either if it's greater than 0, which is 50, will print positive. If it's 0, it will print 0. And finally, if the number is negative something, which is less than 0, it will print negative number. So let's do another example for this just to get clarity on this. I'm going to call it example 2, and this one I'll call it nested conditions. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to set a variable called as age and set it to 25, and I'm going to check if age is greater than 18, and then I'll put a couple of more conditions in there. I'm going to say if age is less than 30, which means the age is in between 19 and less than 30 to 29. So I'm going to say this person is a young adult. And if it's not, else I am going to say print adult. Save this. I'm going to comment this out by putting the hashtag over there. Clear this out, run this code again, and it says young adult because the age is 25. But what if the age is 32? Run this again and it says it's adult. So what it does is it checks, first of all, is this person an adult, and I will check if that person is less than 30, then it's young adult, which means the age is in between 19 It's between 18 and 30, so it's 19, 20 up till 29. If it's greater than 29, if it's 30 or above, it will say print adult. But what if it's 5? It's not even going to run into this. So if, let's say if the age is 3, I run this, nothing is printed because it will not even go inside this particular nested conditional statement. So that kind of wraps up our control flow in Python. Let's look at the next thing that we have to do. Next, we have loops. Now, there are different types of loops. We will start with for loop. Now, for loop iterates over a sequence of items. It can be a list that we have seen before, it can be a tuple, and again, it can also loop over string, because string is nothing but a sequence of characters. And we also have range and other things, which we'll look in future. So let's first look at the syntax for this. So if I want to use the same one, comment it out, go above, and I want to look at the syntax for loop, and that goes something like that. You say for item in a particular sequence, be it, as I mentioned, list, tuple, string, range, and or anything else, I can write my code block inside here, something like that. Now let's go ahead and create an example. So what I'm going to do is I am going to comment this out, and let's create an example where I want to loop through a list of items. So to do that, first let's create that list. I'm going to say fruits equal to, I'm going to create a list of fruits. The first item I want to say apple, another one I want to put a banana in there, and C for, let's put cherry. So I have a list of fruits here, and now I want to loop through them. I'm going to say for fruit in fruits. So this variable can be anything. I can just say a, but it doesn't make sense. What it does is it takes each item one time and runs through the loop. So for example, it will look for first time when it runs, it takes apple, and the value of fruit is apple in this case. In the second run, when it runs through it again, it will take banana and assign it to fruit. Third time it runs, it will take cherry and assign it to fruit. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to say print fruit. So this, let's run it, and we have apple, banana, and cherry. That's what is printed out here. I can do loop through a range, which I mentioned earlier. The way to do it is, let me just first write a comment, loop with range, and inside this I'm going to say for I in range of 5. So what this does is it will create an list of 1 to 5 items, and it will assign each item once inside this range from 1 to 5 and print that out. So if I run this here, it will say 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So what it does is here it creates, let me just add a comment, create a list of 0, 1, 2, or sequence 4. So these are 5 items. So when you say number range of 5, it will create these 5 items and assign it each every time it runs through the loop. So I'm going to say first time it will take 0 and print that 0. I'm going to comment this out so you can see a better output. Also clear this out so you can see it properly. So first it goes through the first item in the range, which is 0. It prints that out. Next 1, 2, 3, and 4. These 5 items are printed one at a time. If I say 10 here, run this again, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way until 9. The 10 items we can display here. So this can be used for a bunch of different things. So that's for loop for you. I'm going to comment it out. The next loop that we're going to look at is while loop. Now while loop executes as long as the condition is true. So what I mean by that is you write a condition with while. For example, let me show you the syntax. So the syntax for while loop is something like this. While a condition, so this is can be a variable name, which is a boolean, can be a particular, you can equate things and check if this particular condition is true, and if that is true, then this is the code that it will run until this condition keeps on staying true. So if I say if true, this is how you can write an infinite loop. So it will keep on running forever unless you add some break or something inside it, but we'll cover that later. So I'm going to comment this out right now. And let's go ahead and create an example. I'm going to say create a countdown. I want to create a countdown. I'm going to call it countdown from 5. So I am going to create a variable, say count equal to 5, and then I'm going to say while count is greater than 0, I want to print that count. Now what will happen in this case is, if I run this, is count greater than 0? Count value is 5, so it is greater than 0, so it's going to print 5. Again, it will come again and check, oh, count greater than 0? It is 5, nothing has changed this value, so it's going to print 5, 5, 5 and keep on going forever. So that it does a proper countdown, I am going to say, or reduce the count by 1. So what I'm doing here is, I'm using the decrement operator here, where it's same as saying count minus 1. Instead of doing this, there's a shortcut which is a decrement operator. There's also an increment operator or a multiply operator, division. So all those are available, but what I'm going to do here is I will reduce the count by 1 every time this prints out. So 5 reduces the value of count to 4, and its count is greater than 0. Yes, it is. So 4, 3, 2, 1. Then when its assigned value is 0, is count greater than 0? Nope. It will come out and come here where I'm going to say outside while loop. So that's what will happen. So let's go ahead and play with it. Clear this out. Run it. There you go. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 and outside while loop. So that's how while loop works. So I'm going to clear this out, comment it out, and go back to my slides. So next, we're going to look at using break and continue for control flow. So I've mentioned these before a little bit, but let's go ahead in more detail of what break and continue does. So first, break. Break terminates the loop prematurely when a condition is met. So if a loop is going on and you want to stop because a particular condition is met, you can use break for that. So an example for that can be, let me just create here. Let's create a for loop for I in range of 10. I want to print I. So what this will do right now is, if I run this 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, because I'm saying range of 10, I want to print I, so it goes through that. But I want to stop it after 5. So I can say if I equal to 5, so I'm adding a conditional statement here saying that if the value of I is 5, just break out of this for loop. I don't want to run this anymore. And I can always put this here outside for loop. Run this. You see 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, because when the value of 5, it will break out from this for loop and come outside and print this. If I similarly, I can say 7, it will print all the way till 6 and then come outside the loop. So that's how you can break a particular loop. Maybe it's for or while, anything, you can break out of the loop by using break. Next, we have continue. Now, continue skips the current iteration and proceeds to the next one. So what it happens is that if you are running a loop, it will skip that particular operation and run to the next one. So for example, in this particular case, same case, I can give you an example. Continue. So what will happen is, in this case, when the value of I is 7, it will skip that print and go back here. So it will say 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then skip 7 and go 8, 9, 10. So it continues to the next loop. So if I run this, let's go ahead. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. See, 7 is missing, 8 and 9. Similarly, if I want to miss, let's say 5, run it. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. I can skip something and run, still continue running the loop. So that's what continue is used for. Let's look at one more example here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to clear it out. I'm going to comment this out. And I'm going to say for I in range of 10. And in here, I am checking if I mod, I'm not sure if you've used the mod operator, but it gives you if it's divisible by 2 or not. If it's divisible by 2, I want to continue, not break, and go to the next one. So this will print only if odd numbers. So if I run this, 1 3 5 7 9. So what's happening is it's going through this I range 0 to 10, but when it checks 0, it will say, oh, 0 divisible by 2 is 0, whereas 1 divided by 2 is 1. So it will print 1. It will not go inside this loop. But for 2 divided by 2 is 0, so it will skip this, and so it will run through 0 to 10, and it will only look for odd numbers because even numbers are divisible by 2 and the value is 0, so it will continue and skip that particular loop. So that's why I see all odd numbers here. So now that we have completed all the different conditional statements and loops, control flow types, so now we can jump into our hands-on exercise. Our first exercise is to check if a number is prime. So here the main objective is to write a Python program to determine if a given number is a prime number. So for this, first you need to know what a prime number is. A prime number is only divisible by 1 and itself. We can use a loop to check divisibility for numbers between 2 and the square root of the given number. That's what we can do, and we can break the loop if a divisor is found in this particular case. So that's how you can get prime numbers. So let's go ahead, and I'm going to leave it as it is, this one. I'm going to create a new file, save it as day 2 exercise 1.py. Now here, first let's get the number equal to int, and instead of me giving a number here or setting a variable with a number, what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask the user who is going to run the command prompt to give me that number. So I can use input, and I can ask the user enter a number. So there you go. And now I'm going to say if number is greater than 1, first of all, inside here I am going to check for I in range of 2 comma integer number raised to 0.5 plus 1 if num mod I equal to 0, then in this case this is not a prime number. So just to go over it again, just to understand better, what I'm doing here in the first line is I'm asking the user to enter a number, and I'm converting that number into an int right over here, and that number I'm saving inside the variable num. Next, I'm checking if the number is greater than 1. This checks if the input number that I've saved here is greater than 1. But why am I doing it? Prime numbers are defined as integers greater than 1 that are divisible only by 1 and themselves. So that's why I am checking if the number is greater than 1. If not, it will skip the program and then proceed to check if it's prime. So if not, then it will skip to the else block at the end, which we'll write in a little while. But right now here, once let's say if the number is say 13, it's going to check here in line number 3 to 7. What it does this is range 2 comma integer num times multiply 5. What it does is it generates numbers starting from 2 up to the square root of num. So this is how you get the square root, rounded up to the nearest integer plus 1. So that's what's happening here. Now why am I doing square root here? If a number is not divisible by any number less than or equal to its square root, it's prime. This optimization reduces the number of checks. So for I in this thing, it iterates through each number I in the generated range to check if number is divisible by I. So that's what it's doing here. So next, in this particular line, if num mod I equal to 0, it checks if the number is divisible by I using the modulus operator. If num mod I equal to 0, it means num is divisible by I, so it's not prime. Next thing is to let the user know that. So I'm going to say print, and since I'm going to add a variable, you start with f, and then here is what you pass the variable inside the curly brackets is not a prime number. So this will show it like that, and I'm going to go and break out of it here. So this will break out of my current loop. Else, now else is for this particular case, I am going to say, I am going to print f number is a prime number. Now I have one more if, like let's make sure we are all aligned on which if I'm writing that to, and I have one more if on the top. For that I'm going to else print f of number is not a prime number. Oop. Is not a prime number outside. So what's happening here is in the else loops, uh, once I break out of here, if it's not a prime number, that's done. Next, what I'm doing in the following lines is I am printing. So if it's not a prime number and if it doesn't mod this, so I am saying else it's a prime number. That's what I'm saying here. And finally, the last else block is associated with the for loop, where so when does this execute? If the for loop completes without encountering a break, no divisor was found, that's when this will run. So it has to be kind of given right outside for loop. And then the final one, it prints. So what happens in the end is this else block belongs to if number is greater than 1 statement, which means if this will execute saying that if the number is not greater than 1. So for example, if it's 0, 1 or negative numbers, this will run from here. So let's go ahead, save this and run this particular code. I'm going to say python day2 underscore exercise 1.py. So it's asking me first line, enter a number. So let's say I will enter 10, which I know is not a prime number. Say 10 is not a prime number. I am going to go and run it again, and this time I'll give 13, which I know is a prime number, and it says 13 is a prime number. So it goes through the loop, finds out that it is not divisible by any of these numbers, and that's why it's going to go and say it's a prime number here. So that kind of completes our first exercise, where we have created the code to find out if a number is prime or not. Our next exercise is to create a menu driven calculator. The objective here is to create a Python program that takes user input to display a menu with simple math operations, where we'll be doing addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. So the instruction that I would want to give you before we start is we'll have to present a menu with options, just like how we did before. But before we asked user to, in exercise 1, we asked the user to enter a number. But here we'll give them a menu of addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. Then we'll allow the user to select an option and input numbers. Then perform the selected operation that user wants and display the result. We'll use a loop to repeat the menu until the user exits. So first, let's go ahead and create a new file. I'm going to save this and I'm going to say day2 exercise2.py. Here, let's start with the functions. We have not yet covered functions, but it's better we go through it as and when we learn it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a function called add, which adds two numbers. I'm going to give two parameters, a and b. Now, if you don't understand what I'm doing here, just follow along, and in the next section, we'll learn more on these. And here, I'm going to say return a plus b, because that's how you add two numbers. Next, I am going to say subtract, and that again takes two numbers, a comma b, and this one returns, so this function will return a minus b. Next, I want to do a multiplication. I'll say multiply, and I'll take two numbers, a comma b, and I will return a times b. Next, I am going to do divide, and this again will take two parameters, and this will first in division sometimes you check if it's not equal to 0. So I'm going to say not divisible by 0. So b is not equal to 0, so I'll have to make sure that division by 0 is not allowed here. So I am going to check if b is not equal to 0, because a divided by b, and in this case the second argument, if it's 0 or not 0, I will say return a divided by b. If the user gives me a 0, I am going to print out saying, or return back saying division by 0 is not allowed. Just an extra precaution here. So these are my four functions to add, subtract, multiply, and divide. Now I'm going to write a loop here. I'm going to say while true. Again, as I mentioned, when you say while true, it will run on a constant loop. Now to break out of it, you can just say break. But where should I say it break? So first, as I mentioned, we need to give a user a menu option. So I'm going to say print, and in here next line /n adds the next line in the terminal or a command prompt. I'm going to say menu. Now the menu, I will give user options where, so this one is for addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, and exit. So I think I have all of them. Number one, so if user says number one, it's an addition. If the user presses number 2, I will say subtraction. If the user presses number 3, I'll say multiplication. If the user presses number 4, it's division. Number 5 is to exit. So which means if the user presses 5, I will just exit out of the loop. So if you want to see how that is done, I can just say if let's get the choice first from user. So I'm going to say choice equal to input. I'm going to ask user enter your choice based on the above menu. So based on the above menu, I'm going to ask the user to enter something, and if the user picks, let's say 5, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say print exiting program, and I will break out of this code. Break out of while loop, which is end of this function. There's nothing else outside it. Or else I'll ask the user to enter the two numbers. I'm going to say number 1, I'll take it as float because user might enter decimal point values, and I'll ask the user to input something. I'll say enter the first number, and I let user enter his first number, his or her first number. Number 2, float, enter second number. This is where the user will enter the second number. Now I have both the numbers. What I'm going to do is I'm going to check if choice equal to 1. If the user selected 1 as his choice, which is addition, so what I'm going to do is print result is add. I'm going to call the function add, which is right here, and it needs two parameters, which are my number 1 and number 2. So I'll pass that. So what it does is if the user picked 1 here and then entered 2 and then enter the second number as 4, I'm going to pass this 2 and 4 to this add, which is 6, and it will show me print the result equal to 6 in this particular case. So that's the first one. So I'm going to copy this few times. Now I can't do if because what it will do is it will go through each and every one 4 times. 1, 2, 3, 4. So this is 2, 3, 4. If I leave it like this and add the functions, subtract, third one was multiplication, and the last one was subtract. So these are the different options. Now if I run it through here, it will check each and every time, but I want to see, like, if I'll check 1, if it's not 1, then I want to check the second one. Or else what it will happen is even if the choice is 1, it will go through each and every statement. Else this one. Now what if user types anything other than 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? So for that I will say else print invalid choice, please try again. So for example, if the user presses 9, we don't have the anything to do with 9, so I'll say invalid choice and I'll ask the user to try again. So go ahead and run this. Let me clear this out. This is called day 2 exercise 2. So here is my menu. Addition, so this printed out addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, exit. So I am going to say 1. Now it says enter your first number. I say 3. Enter second number 5. Now 5 plus 3, and as you saw that I took the input as float, so it will take it as 3.0 and 5.0 and print out 8.0 for me. Similarly, if then again it will run through the while loop again. Since I've not exited the loop, 2, I'll say 5 and 1, let's say 4.2 is the result. Similarly, if I pick 3, I'll say 4 times 5 should be 20. Now 4, I want to divide 4 by 0. So looks like here in the code, instead of calling the divide, I was calling the subtract. So I'm going to fix that and go ahead and run my code again. Give the option 4 and say 4, second number 0, and it's a division by 0 is not allowed. Let's go ahead and pick 5, exiting the program. So that's our exercise number 2. I hope you were able to get through it. If you have any questions or any problems, let me know. And for the next things, what you can do is, for additional practice, I have a couple of more programs for you. What you can do is you can write a program to calculate the factorial of a number using a while loop. Now, if you don't know what a factorial is, go ahead, look it up, and then write this to create to calculate the factorial of a number using a while loop. Next, you can try to create a program to find the largest number in a list using a for loop. So you can try that out. So if you have a list of items, so create a list of items and add some numbers inside there and use a for loop to go through each and every item in that particular list and find the largest number in the list. So that's it for day 2, where you learned the foundational control flow constructs in Python, including conditional statements, loops, and flow control keywords like break and continue. The hands-on exercise probably helped you with concepts with real-world programming tasks, preparing you for more complex logical challenges, and try to do these additional practice sessions on your own. If you had any problems or have any questions, let me know and I'll get back to you.